Today we're diving into the incredible story of Africa after colonialism. It's a story that kicks off with this massive, continent-wide dream of unity and freedom, but pretty quickly runs into a much tougher reality.
So picture this. It's the middle of the 20th century, and the map of Africa is changing at a dizzying speed. The old European empires are falling apart, and in their place, dozens of new countries are born, seemingly all at once. It was a moment of just immense hope.
And at the absolute center of all that optimism was this huge idea, Pan-Africanism. Its biggest voice was Ghana's first president, the charismatic Kwame Nkrumah. His vision was incredible, not just for free countries, but for a single, powerful, united continent.
But that was the dream. The reality? Well, the road from being a colony to being a truly independent and successful nation was full of traps and obstacles nobody saw coming. The dream was simple, but the real world was messy.
Okay, so let's start with that incredible high point, that initial rush of euphoria. In the late 50s and early 60s, it really felt like anything was possible. And I mean, this happened fast. Just look at these numbers. In 1945, there were only 4 independent African nations in the UN. Fast forward just 15 years to 1960, and that number jumps to 29. It was a literal political explosion on the world stage. And in 1963, they made it official, creating the Organization of African Unity, or the OAU. And their goals? Wow, they were not thinking small. They wanted to protect their new freedom, unite the entire continent politically, create wealth for everyone, and, this was a big one, stay completely neutral in the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union.
Which brings us right back to this guy, Kwame Nkrumah. He was the engine behind the OAU, pushing that Pan-African idea non-stop. For him, and for so many others, this was the first real step toward that incredible dream of a United States of Africa.
But here's the thing. Almost right away, that dream of being truly 100% independent hit a massive wall. Turns out, the old colonial powers hadn't really left. They just got sneakier. There's a word for this: neo-imperialism. And here's what it boils down to. Even with new flags flying and African leaders in charge, foreign powers still pulled the strings through money, politics, and military deals. The chains were still there. They were just invisible. And they had different playbooks. The British, they played it subtle, right? They used their big corporations and cultural connections through the Commonwealth. The French, on the other hand, way more direct. We're talking military pacts and keeping a tight grip on the money supply in their former colonies. And this wasn't just a threat. France had about 10,000 troops stationed across the continent, and they used them, intervening over and over again in places like Chad and Zaire to keep friendly governments in power and protect their business interests. So much for political independence. On top of all that, there was a second crippling problem: the economy. So many of these new nations got caught in this economic vice that just squeezed all the life out of their plans for the future.
And it was a vicious cycle. First, you have global recessions and oil crises in the 70s that just hammered these new, fragile economies. Then, the prices for the coffee, cocoa, and minerals they were selling to the world, they completely collapsed. To keep the lights on, they had to borrow tons of money from foreign banks. And before they knew it, they were drowning in debt.
To give you some perspective, in 1973, the whole continent's foreign debt was about $14 billion. Which, yeah, that's a lot of money. But just wait. Just a little over a decade later, by 1984, that debt had exploded to $150 billion. We're talking a more than 10-fold increase. It was an absolute economic catastrophe. So, that beautiful dream of using independence to build modern, thriving countries, it got turned completely upside down. It felt like they had just swapped one kind of master for another. And if all that wasn't enough, a third wrecking ball was about to hit: the Cold War. That goal of staying neutral? It was about to get blown to pieces as the US and the Soviets decided to make Africa their new playground. And it all happened so fast. In '74, Portugal's empire collapses, leaving a huge power vacuum. The very next year, the Soviets and Cubans jump into a civil war in Angola. Then, in a wild move, Moscow ditches its ally Somalia to back a new regime in Ethiopia. By 1978, Washington decides it has to get tough, and suddenly local African conflicts became global proxy war. The result? The continent was split right down the middle. You had to pick a side: Team Washington or Team Moscow. This wasn't just talk. It fueled brutal wars and meant that what was best for Africa often took a backseat to what the superpowers wanted. And with that, the OAU's founding idea of non-alignment, it was in ruins.
That beautiful dream of a unified Africa speaking with one voice on the world stage was gone.
So, where does that leave us? The grand visions of the early 60s felt like a forgotten memory. The continent was divided, it was in debt, and it was still tangled up in foreign power games.
But, even though that big dream of unity was in tatters, the spirit behind it wasn't completely dead. Because out of all that division, one issue started to rise up. An issue that could bring nearly everyone back together for a common cause.
And that cause was the fight against apartheid in South Africa. The struggle against this horrific system of state-sponsored racism became this incredibly powerful rallying cry. It was a clear-cut case of good versus evil that sliced right through the Cold War politics and the economic despair. It reminded the entire continent of what that original fight for freedom was all about.
And that really brings us to the heart of it. The path from independence to true sovereignty, man, it was just brutal. Full of neo-imperialism, debt traps, and superpower games. The dream of the 1960s was absolutely deferred, but maybe it wasn't destroyed. Which leaves us with a huge question, one that's still relevant today. What does the path to real, lasting independence actually look like?